The morning fog rolled through the streets of San Francisco, creating a misty curtain over the city's towering buildings. It was just another busy Tuesday, with people rushing to work, coffee cups in hand, barely noticing the world around them. But this ordinary morning was about to become extraordinary for two very different men whose paths were destined to cross. Elon Musk was walking down Mission Street, his mind preoccupied with the morning's upcoming meeting. He'd chosen to walk instead of drive, something he did occasionally to clear his head before important decisions. The Tesla factory had been facing some production challenges, and solutions weren't coming as easily as he'd hoped. His simple black jacket and jeans helped him blend in with the crowd, a rare moment of anonymity for one of the world's most recognized faces. As he passed by an old brick building with a faded for lease sign, something caught his eye, or rather someone. In the recessed doorway, an elderly man sat with remarkable posture, despite his weathered appearance. Unlike many others in similar situations, this man's eyes were alert, observant, scanning the street with the practiced gaze of someone who had spent years watching over others. The man had arranged his few possessions with military precision: a small backpack, a neatly folded blanket, and a worn leather wallet placed carefully beside him. His clothes, though clearly old, were clean and methodically maintained. A small American flag pin, tarnished but proudly displayed, was fastened to his jacket lapel. Musk found himself slowing down, then stopping completely. There was something different about this man, something that didn't fit the usual narrative. Perhaps it was the way he nodded politely to passers-by, or how he kept his small space tidy and organized. Whatever it was, it made Musk pause in his tracks. The older man noticed Musk's attention but didn't immediately make eye contact. Instead, he continued his vigilant watch of the street, a habit formed over decades of law enforcement work. When their eyes finally met, there was no plea for help, no immediate request for money. Instead, there was a dignified nod, the kind that passes between equals. "Good morning," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of authority despite his circumstances. "You might want to step to your left a bit, sir. The bike messenger that comes through here tends to cut it pretty close to the curb." Just as he finished speaking, a courier whizzed by, exactly where Musk had been standing moments before. This simple act of looking out for a stranger's safety, even from his position on the street, spoke volumes about the man's character. Musk found himself intrigued. "You seem to know this street pretty well," he said, moving closer to the doorway. The man smiled slightly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. 35 years in law enforcement teaches you to notice patterns. Doesn't matter if it's a busy intersection or a quiet street, people tend to follow routines. What started as a casual observation turned into a conversation. The man, who introduced himself as James Connor, spoke with the measured tone of someone used to giving official statements. His words carried no self-pity, no blame for his circumstances. Instead, he shared his observations about the city's changing face, about the people who passed by each day, about the small acts of kindness he witnessed from his doorway vantage point. The conversation flowed naturally, with Connor occasionally pausing to warn other pedestrians about approaching cyclists or point out to a young mother that her child's shoelace was untied. Even without a badge or uniform, he continued to serve his community in whatever way he could. As they talked, the morning fog began to lift, revealing more of the city's skyline. Office workers streamed past, some giving curious glances at the unusual sight of a man in designer shoes having an animated conversation with someone living on the street. But neither Musk nor Connor paid them any attention, both engrossed in their unexpected exchange. Little did either man know that this chance encounter, this simple morning conversation, would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change their lives, but inspire a movement that would touch countless others. Sometimes, the most significant moments in life come disguised as ordinary days, and the most important connections are made when we least expect them. For now, though, it was just two men talking on a San Francisco street, sharing their perspectives on life, duty, and the strange turns that fate sometimes takes. The meeting Musk was headed to would have to wait. Some conversations are too important to cut short, and some stories too compelling to walk away from. The morning sun had fully broken through the fog now, casting long shadows across the San Francisco sidewalk. Elon Musk found himself sitting on a nearby bench he pulled up, completely forgetting about his scheduled meeting. There was something about James Connor's story that demanded to be heard, not just listened to. "I never thought I'd end up here," Connor began, his weathered hands clasped together. "Funny how life throws curveballs when you least expect them." His voice carried no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance of the twists fate had dealt him. He reached into his carefully organized backpack and pulled out an old leather wallet. From it, he retrieved a folded photograph, creased from years of being carried, but still clear enough to show a younger version of himself in uniform, standing proudly outside a small-town police station. "That was taken on my first day as sheriff," he explained, handling the photo with gentle care. "Small town called Pine Valley, about 3 hours north of here. Not the kind of place that makes the news much, and that's exactly how we liked it." As Connor spoke about his years of service, his posture straightened even more, if that was possible. He told stories of ordinary days turned extraordinary, helping deliver a baby in the back of a car during a snowstorm, talking a teenager down from a bridge late one night, and organizing search parties for lost hikers in the nearby mountains. "The thing about being a sheriff in a small town," he continued, "is that you're not just law enforcement. You're a counselor, a mediator, sometimes even a veterinarian when someone's cow wanders onto the highway at midnight." A small smile played across his face at the memory. But then his expression changed, becoming more somber. "Everything changed 3 years ago. My wife, Nancy, she was the backbone of our family, taught second grade for 30 years. She started getting headaches. Bad ones." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "The doctors found something. Brain tumor, they said. Inoperable." Musk listened intently as Connor described the months that followed. The endless hospital visits, the experimental treatments they tried, the way their savings began to dwindle. "We had insurance," Connor explained, "but you know how it goes. There's always something that's not covered, always another specialist to see, another treatment to try." Then, as if life hadn't thrown enough their way, disaster struck again. "It was a faulty wire in the walls," Connor said, his voice growing quieter. "The fire department said it probably started in the afternoon. By the time anyone noticed, our house was," he trailed off, looking down at his hands. 30 years of memories, photos, everything we'd built together, gone in a few hours." The insurance company fought the claim, citing some technical clause about electrical inspections. Between the medical bills and the lost house, their financial foundation crumbled. Nancy passed away 6 months later, leaving Connor alone to face mounting debts and a system that seemed designed to overwhelm those already struggling. "I tried everything," he continued, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "Sold my truck, picked up odd jobs, even tried security work at the mall. But at my age, with my knees not being what they used to be," he shook his head slowly, "sometimes life just gets ahead of you, no matter how carefully you've planned." What struck Musk most wasn't just the series of tragedies, but how Connor spoke about them, with dignity, without asking for pity. He described how he'd lived in his car at first, then stayed with friends until he felt he'd imposed too much. Eventually, he found himself in San Francisco, drawn by the promise of more opportunities and the anonymity of a big city. "The hardest part isn't the physical discomfort," Connor admitted, gesturing to his modest setup in the doorway. "It's maintaining your sense of purpose. For 35 years, I woke up every morning knowing exactly what I needed to do, serve and protect. Now," he straightened his American flag pin, "now I try to help where I can. Keep an eye on the street, make sure the other folks who sleep rough around here are okay. Old habits die hard, I guess." Through it all, Connor had never sought publicity or handouts. He kept his pride, made sure he was clean and presentable, and continued to carry himself with the dignity of his former position. Even now, he spent part of each day at the public library, using their computers to search for work and keep up with current events. As he spoke, regular passers-by would wave or nod, evidence that even in his current situation, he'd managed to become a respected figure in the neighborhood. A local coffee shop owner came by with 2 cups of coffee, refusing payment from Musk. "Officer Connor keeps an eye on my place at night," she explained. "It's the least I can do." The story would have been moving enough on its own, but there was something more, an underlying resilience, a refusal to be defined by circumstances rather than character. Here was a man who had spent his life protecting others, now stripped of almost everything except his fundamental nature to serve. Musk found himself deeply affected by Connor's tale, not just because of its tragedy, but because of the quiet dignity with which it was told. In a world of viral sub-stories and orchestrated pleas for help, here was something genuine. A man who had given everything to his community and asked for nothing in return, even when he had nothing left to give but his watchful eye and caring heart. The conversation between Elon Musk and James Connor had drawn them into a world of their own, oblivious to the bustling city around them. The morning had warmed up, and the coffee cups sat empty beside them. As Connor continued sharing stories from his past, something sparked in Musk's memory. "You mentioned working security at some tech events," Musk said, leaning forward slightly. "Do you remember which ones?" Connor's eyes lit up with a hint of pride. "Oh yes, did quite a few of them back in 2012. The biggest one was this electric car showcase down in San Jose. Must have been thousands of people there." He paused, thinking back. Actually, it got pretty intense that day. As Connor began describing the event, Musk's expression changed. The details were bringing back vivid memories of his own. It was one of Tesla's early presentations, a crucial moment for the company when they were still fighting to prove electric cars could be both practical and exciting. The venue was packed way over capacity. Connor continued, his law enforcement instincts evident in the precise way he recalled the details. Fire marshal was about to shut it down. Could have been a disaster for the company doing the presentation. Musk nodded slowly, remembering that day. The crowd had been much larger than expected, and the fire marshal had indeed threatened to end the event before it began. It would have been a devastating setback for Tesla at a critical time. Instead of just clearing everyone out, Connor went on, "I worked with my team to reorganize the whole space. We opened up some side areas, set up a rotation system so everyone could see the presentation in smaller groups. Took some doing, but we made it work." He smiled at the memory. The company CEO seemed pleased. Tall fellow, quite focused. Didn't catch his name, but he gave a really interesting talk about the future of transportation. Musk couldn't help but smile. "I remember that day very well," he said quietly. "I was that CEO." The realization slowly dawned on Connor's face. He looked at Musk more carefully now, recognition finally setting in. "Well, I'll be," he said softly. "You know, you look different without the suit and presentation slides." The moment could have been awkward, but instead, it sparked a deeper conversation about that day. Connor described how he'd been impressed by the vision for electric vehicles, even though he'd been there just to manage security. "It stuck with me," he admitted. "Made me think differently about where technology was heading." He recalled specific details that only someone who had been there would know. The way the prototype cast Falcon wing doors had briefly malfunctioned during rehearsal, how the audio system had cut out twice, and how despite these challenges, the presentation had gone on to be a success. "Your security team did more than just manage the crowd," Musk remembered. "You helped keep everything running smoothly behind the scenes too. I never got to properly thank you for that." Connor waved off the gratitude, "Just doing my job." Though I have to admit, it's a bit surreal sitting here now, thinking back to that day. He shook his head with a gentle laugh. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? The connection they'd discovered added new layers to their conversation. Connor shared more about how he'd seen Silicon Valley transform over the years from his various security posts, offering a unique perspective on the tech industry's evolution from someone who had watched it all from the outside. "You know what impressed me most about that presentation?" Connor said, after a thoughtful pause. "It wasn't just the technology, it was how you handled the setbacks. Things kept going wrong, but you just kept problem-solving on the fly. Reminded me of my days on patrol. You never know what's coming next. You just have to stay cool and figure it out." As they talked, more memories from that day emerged. Connor remembered helping an elderly attendee who had felt faint in the crowd, making sure she got water and a seat with a good view of the presentation. He recalled coordinating with the venue's staff to manage the overflow crowd, turning what could have been a disappointing day for many into a successful event for everyone. "That kind of quick thinking and care for others, you can't train that," Musk observed. "It comes from years of experience and genuine concern for people." The morning had grown into early afternoon, and the street had gotten busier with lunch crowds. But neither man noticed the time passing. They were lost in conversation about that day in 2012, about how the world had changed since then, about the strange coincidences that sometimes bring people's paths back together. For Connor, the recognition didn't change his dignity or his story. He remained the same man he'd been before Musk recognized him, proud but humble, capable but down on his luck. If anything, the connection only highlighted the unpredictable nature of life's journey, how a person could go from managing crowd control at a major tech event to living on the streets, or from being an unknown entrepreneur to one of the world's most influential figures. This realization struck Musk deeply. He was someone who had played a small but significant role in Tesla's journey, now facing circumstances that could happen to anyone. The coincidence felt like more than just chance. It felt like an opportunity to acknowledge the often invisible people who help build success stories, one careful decision at a time. The afternoon sun had begun to cast long shadows across the San Francisco street when Elon Musk finally pulled out his phone. He'd missed 3 meetings and dozens of calls, but something more important had captured his attention. The story of James Connor, from respected sheriff to homeless veteran, demanded more than just sympathy. It required action. "I'd like to help," Musk said simply, his fingers hovering over his phone's screen. "Not because of what you did at the Tesla event, but because of who you are and what you've given to your community." Connor shifted uncomfortably, his pride visible in the straightening of his shoulders. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not looking for handouts. Never have been." His voice was firm but gentle, carrying the same authority he'd used during his years in law enforcement. "This isn't a handout," Musk replied thoughtfully. "Think of it as a long overdue thank you from society. Sometimes the system fails the very people who've spent their lives protecting it." Before Connor could protest further, Musk made a call. He spoke quietly into the phone, stepping a few feet away out of respect. The call was brief, but its impact would be lasting. Within 20 minutes, a black Tesla pulled up to the curb, driven by a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as Lisa from Musk's team. "I've booked you a room at the hotel down the street," Musk explained to Connor. "Nothing fancy, just a clean, safe place where you can rest properly and figure out your next steps." He could see the hesitation in Connor's eyes and added, "You're not the first person who's hit hard times after a lifetime of service, and you won't be the last. But you might be able to help us understand how to prevent this from happening to others." Connor looked at his few possessions, neatly arranged in the doorway that had been his home for the past few months. His law enforcement training had taught him to be cautious, to question unexpected offers, but his instincts told him this was genuine. "The room is already paid for," Lisa explained gently. "We've also arranged for some clothes and basic necessities to be delivered. There's a medical team on standby if you'd like to have a checkup, but that's entirely your choice." Connor's eyes grew misty, but his voice remained steady. "I don't know what to say." He paused, looking at the flag pin on his jacket. "It's been a while since I've slept in a real bed." "Say you'll help us understand how to make the system better," Musk responded. "Your experience, both as a law enforcement officer and as someone who's faced these challenges, could be invaluable." As Connor carefully packed his few belongings, a small crowd of local shopkeepers and regular passers-by gathered. The coffee shop owner who had brought them coffee earlier came out with a bag of fresh pastries. "For the road," she said, her eyes bright with happiness for the man who had watched over her shop all these months. The hotel wasn't far, just 3 blocks away, but the walk felt like a journey between worlds. Connor carried himself with the same dignity he'd shown on the street, but there was a new lightness in his step. Lisa walked beside him, chatting casually about the neighborhood, while Musk followed a few steps behind, still making calls. At the hotel's front desk, the staff treated Connor with the respect due to any guest, not a hint of judgment in their manner. The room was simple but clean, with a view of the city he'd been living in, but seeing from a very different perspective until now. "Get some rest," Musk said at the door. "Take a hot shower, order some food, whatever you need. Lisa will be available if you need anything." He handed Connor a business card with a direct number. "When you're ready, we'd like to talk more about how we can work together to make real changes." Connor stood in the hotel room, his small backpack still in his hand, looking around as if trying to convince himself this was real. "You know," he said slowly, "in all my years as a sheriff, I learned that sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest moments of connection. Today proved that again. As Musk turned to leave, Connor called out, "Thank you for stopping this morning. Not for all this," he gestured at the room, "but for stopping to talk. For seeing me as a person, not just another problem on the street." Musk nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes the best way to solve big problems is to start with the person right in front of you. After they left, Connor sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the clean, crisp sheets. His eyes fell on his reflection in the mirror. Still the same man, still carrying the same strength and dignity that had guided him through his law enforcement career and the hardships that followed. But now, for the first time in months, he also saw something else. Hope. The sun was setting over San Francisco, casting an orange glow through the window. In a city known for both its tremendous wealth and devastating poverty, two people from very different worlds had connected on a human level. It wasn't just about money or immediate solutions. It was about recognizing the inherent dignity in every person and the responsibility we all share to help lift each other up. While James Connor rested in his hotel room, Elon Musk's team began their quiet investigation, not out of suspicion, but from a genuine desire to understand how a dedicated public servant could end up on the streets. Lisa, who had helped settle Connor into the hotel, led the research effort with the same care and respect she'd shown in person. The first discovery came from the local newspaper archives in Pine Valley. The yellowed pages of the town's weekly paper told stories that brought Connor's past to life. There he was in a grainy photo from 1995, standing outside a small house surrounded by police tape. The headline read, "Local Sheriff Saves Family in Holiday Hostage Drama." The article detailed how Connor had talked down an armed man for 6 hours straight, refusing to leave until every family member was safely out. What caught Lisa's attention wasn't just the heroic act, but the quotes from the family afterward. "He didn't just save us," the mother had said. "He saved the man who broke into, treated everyone with respect, even in the worst moment." More articles emerged as the team dug deeper. Connor organizing a search party for 3 lost hikers during the worst storm in decades. Connor starting a youth program to help troubled teens find their way. Each story painted a picture of a man who went above and beyond his official duties. "You need to see this," Lisa said, bringing a stack of papers into Musk's office. Among them was a handwritten letter from 2008 sent by a local teenager to the town council. The boy wrote about how Sheriff Connor had caught him vandalizing the school gym, but instead of arresting him, had made him help repair the damage and then offered him a job maintaining the police station's garden. "He taught me that everyone deserves a second chance," the letter read. "Today, I'm heading to college. I wouldn't be here without him." The team's financial investigation revealed the brutal cascade of events that had led to Connor's current situation. Medical bills piled up fast after his wife's diagnosis. The insurance company's denial of their house fire claim was based on a technicality that would have taken years and thousands in legal fees to fight. The small town's pension system had been underfunded for years, leaving many retired officers with less than they'd been promised. But what struck everyone most was how Connor had handled these setbacks. There were no angry letters to editors, no public complaints. Instead, they found records of him volunteering at a homeless shelter even as his own savings dwindled. He had helped others until he couldn't help himself anymore. Local business owners from his old town were eager to talk about him. The hardware store owner remembered how Connor would buy supplies with his own money to fix elderly residents' homes. The diner owner spoke about how he'd helped troubled kids with homework during his lunch breaks. He saw the good in everyone, she said, even people who couldn't see it in themselves. The investigation uncovered documentation of Connor's time providing security at various tech events. His personnel files showed consistent praise for his professionalism and problem-solving skills. The Tesla event wasn't an isolated incident. He had a knack for turning potential disasters into smooth operations. As evening fell, Lisa gathered the team to share their findings. The conference room wall was covered with articles, letters, and photographs, a lifetime of service laid out in paper and ink. But it was more than just a collection of good deeds. It was evidence of how one person, through small daily acts of kindness and dedication, could weave themselves into the fabric of a community. The medical records told their own story. Connor had postponed his own knee surgery to pay for his wife's treatments. Even after her passing, he had continued to make small payments on the medical bills, sending whatever he could manage each month until he literally had nothing left to give. What touched the team most was finding Connor's daily notebook from his time on the streets. In neat, police report handwriting, he had kept track of other homeless people in his area who needed medical attention, who hadn't been seen in a few days, which local resources were available. Even without a badge or a home, he had continued to watch over others. The investigation also revealed the gaps in the system, how someone could serve their community for decades and still fall through the cracks. It showed how medical bills, personal tragedy, and bureaucratic red tape could combine to overwhelm even the most responsible person. It's not just about one man, Musk said, looking at the wall of evidence. It's about all the others like him. People who've given everything to their communities and found themselves with nowhere to turn. As the team prepared their final report, they weren't just documenting a series of events. They were capturing the story of a man who embodied the best of public service, who had faced adversity with dignity, and who had never stopped trying to help others even when he needed help himself. Their findings would do more than justify helping one former sheriff. They would help shape a program that could prevent others from facing the same fate. But perhaps most importantly, they had uncovered a story that needed to be told, about the thin line between serving a community and needing its help, about the importance of looking out for those who have spent their lives looking out for others. After a week at the hotel, James Connor had regained some of his physical strength, but Elon Musk knew that a temporary fix wasn't enough. One morning, he invited Connor to Tesla's headquarters for a conversation that would change both their lives. The security guard at the entrance did a double take when Connor walked in, not because he looked out of place, but because of how naturally he assessed the lobby's security setup. Old habits die hard, and 35 years of law enforcement experience showed in every movement. The thing about security, Connor said as they walked through the building, is that it's not just about cameras and guards. It's about understanding people. He paused to note how the reception desk was positioned, offering suggestions about sightlines and emergency response routes. Musk listened intently, watching as Connor naturally shifted into his element. Here was a man who hadn't lost his expertise or insight, only the opportunity to use them. That's when the idea crystallized. "We've been looking to overhaul our security training program," Musk explained, leading Connor into a conference room with a view of the factory floor. Not just the technical aspects, but the human element. Teaching our team how to handle difficult situations with compassion while maintaining safety. Connor's eyes lit up with understanding. This wasn't charity. It was an opportunity to share decades of experience. On the conference room table, Lisa had laid out a proposal. It wasn't just a job offer, but a comprehensive plan to get Connor back on his feet. The role would be as a senior security consultant, focusing on training and protocol development. His experience handling crisis situations, his understanding of human nature, and his ability to diffuse tense situations without force made him uniquely qualified. Your experience on the streets, Musk added carefully, that's valuable too. You understand vulnerability in a way most security experts never will. That perspective could help us make our facilities more accessible while keeping them secure. But the plan went beyond employment. Musk's team had been busy negotiating with the hospital that held Connor's outstanding medical bills. Given the circumstances and Connor's decades of public service, the hospital agreed to significantly reduce the debt through their financial assistance program. Lisa presented the housing component next. They'd found an apartment near the Tesla facility, nothing fancy but clean, safe, and within walking distance of work. The rent would be manageable on Connor's new salary, allowing him to rebuild his savings while maintaining his independence. "We're not just offering you a job," Musk explained. "We're asking you to help us build something new. Your experiences, both as a sheriff and during these past difficult months, they give you a unique perspective that we need." Connor sat quietly, looking at the proposal. His hands, still steady after all these years, carefully turned each page. "You know," he said finally, "when I was on the force, I always told young officers that true security comes from understanding both strength and vulnerability. Never thought I'd learn that lesson quite so personally." The plan included healthcare coverage, including the knee surgery Connor had put off for years. There was also a provision for him to take time off to serve as a consultant for local homeless outreach programs, sharing his insights from both sides of the experience. As they discussed the details, Connor's law enforcement training kicked in. He asked thorough questions about responsibilities, reporting structures, and expectations. Each question showed why he'd been such an effective sheriff. He thought through every angle, considering not just his own role, but how it would fit into the larger organization. "There's one condition," Connor said, surprising everyone. "I want to help develop a program for other retired first responders. Too many of my former colleagues are one medical bill away from where I was. We need to create a safety net that catches people before they fall." Musk smiled. Even in this moment, Connor was thinking about others. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. In fact, we've already started looking into creating a foundation specifically for that purpose. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the conference room windows as they finalized the details. This wasn't just about giving someone a job. It was about recognizing the value of experience, both good and bad. It was about turning personal hardship into wisdom that could help others. As Connor signed the papers, his signature was as steady as it had been on countless police reports over the years. But this time, he wasn't documenting a problem, he was becoming part of a solution. "You know what the hardest part of being on the streets was?" Connor said as he put down the pen. "Not the physical discomfort or the hunger. It was feeling like all my years of experience, all the things I'd learned about helping people, were going to waste. This," he gestured at the signed papers, "this isn't just about me getting back on my feet. It's about putting those lessons to use again." The plan would take time to fully implement, but its impact would be lasting. It wasn't a handout or a quick fix, it was a thoughtful solution that recognized both the immediate need for help and the long-term value of experience. More importantly, it was a solution that preserved dignity while creating opportunity. 6 months after that chance meeting on a San Francisco street, the impact of James Connor's story had grown far beyond what anyone expected. The small conference room at Tesla's headquarters was packed with reporters, but they weren't there to cover a new electric car or space mission. They were there to witness the launch of something different, the First Responders Future Foundation. Connor stood at the podium, his posture as straight as it had been in his sheriff days, but now wearing a well-fitted suit instead of a uniform. The American flag pin still adorned his lapel, polished to a shine. His voice carried the same quiet authority it had when Musk first met him on the street. 6 months ago, I was invisible," Connor began, his words cutting through the room's silence. "Just another person who'd fallen through the cracks. Today, I'm here to make sure others like me don't become invisible too." The Foundation's mission was simple but powerful: to identify and support retired first responders facing financial hardship. But it went beyond just providing money. It was about creating second chances, new opportunities, and maintaining the dignity of those who'd spent their lives serving others. In the audience sat 4 other former first responders who had already been helped by the pilot program. There was a retired firefighter who'd lost everything in a flood, now working as a safety consultant for a construction company. A former paramedic whose medical bills had nearly bankrupted her, now helping to train new emergency responders. Each success story added depth to the Foundation's purpose. Elon Musk took the stage after Connor, but instead of his usual technology presentations, he spoke about human connection. "This foundation isn't about charity," he explained. "It's about recognizing the value of experience, about honoring service, and about turning personal hardship into collective wisdom." The program had already sparked interest from other tech companies. 3 major firms had announced similar initiatives, creating jobs specifically for retired first responders. Their experience in crisis management, their understanding of security, and their ability to handle high-pressure situations made them valuable assets in the corporate world. But the real story wasn't in the press conference, it was in the small moments that followed. Like when Connor gave a tour of Tesla's security operations to a group of retired officers, showing them how their skills could transfer to the private sector. Or when he visited his old spot on the street, now bringing coffee to those still struggling, sharing information about resources and opportunities. The local coffee shop owner who used to bring Connor coffee was there too, smiling proudly. Her shop had become an unofficial meeting spot for Foundation members, a place where those seeking help could connect with those offering it. She'd even started a job training program of her own, hiring people transitioning out of homelessness. The foundation's approach was comprehensive. It wasn't just about finding jobs, it was about addressing the root causes that led to hardship. They worked with hospitals to negotiate medical bills, provided financial literacy training, and offered mental health support. Everything was designed to prevent crises before they happened. Connor's daily routine now included regular visits to homeless shelters, but not as someone seeking help. He went as a mentor, a living example that second chances were possible. His story resonated because it was real. People could see themselves in his struggle and find hope in his recovery. The media coverage helped spread the word, but Connor and Musk kept the focus on the mission rather than themselves. They understood that the story's power wasn't in its billionaire helped homeless man angle, but in how it revealed a larger issue affecting many who'd served their communities. Local police departments began partnering with the foundation, creating transition programs for retiring officers. Fire departments and emergency medical services followed suit. The ripple effect touched not just those already struggling, but helped prevent future crises. 1 year after their chance meeting, Connor and Musk stood on that same San Francisco street corner. The neighborhood had changed, not just physically, but in spirit. The foundation's office nearby had become a hub of activity, with former first responders helping others navigate their way back to stability. "You know what I've learned?" Connor said, looking at his old doorway. "Sometimes the best way to help yourself is to help others. Every person we help through the foundation helps 10 more down the line." The impact wasn't just in the numbers, though those were impressive, with over 200 first responders already assisted. It was in the change of perspective, the recognition that experience and wisdom don't disappear with circumstances. It was about seeing people for their potential, not their current situation. As the sun set over San Francisco, casting long shadows across the street where their story began, Connor and Musk reflected on how a simple moment of connection had grown into something larger than themselves. The foundation wasn't just changing lives, it was changing how society viewed both service and struggle, reminding everyone that sometimes the most valuable things we can offer each other are dignity, opportunity, and hope.